Hi everybody, welcome along to today's webinar. This is the second in our two-part series on album-based marketing. Today we're going to be looking at and answering a few questions like how much do you need to charge, and Ian's got a calculator that he's going to show us to help answer some of those questions. So before we get going, let me just introduce the guys we've got with us today. If you were with us last week, you'll know them well. Ian Bohr, who's a director and founder here at Queensberry, will be presenting the webinar, and um, he has Ian Bohr, who's his son and who's also the CEO here at Queensberry, to help him out, as well as Joe Newman, who's our UK account rep. And they've got some really good insights and opinions, which I'm sure we'll hear today, and we're looking forward to it. But before we get going, just a few housekeeping things. If you were with us last week, you'll remember we talked about the questions. There is the opportunity to ask questions live during the webinar. On your control panel, there's a section called questions. You just type your question in, just like a chat program. They come through to us, and we'll answer them during the webinar. If there's any that are applicable to the whole group, I'll pull those out and ask the guys those questions and have a bit of discussion around those. But yeah, we'll do our best to answer all the questions that come in. We are recording today's session like we did last week, so if you do miss something or you want to re-watch it, we will have it online again shortly afterwards. So I think that's about it. There's still a few people to come in, but 8 o'clock's ticked over here in New Zealand, so I think we'll get started if you're ready to go, Ian.
Yes, I am. Good morning, Nigel. Good morning, Joe and Stephen, and everybody that's come along. It's somebody's just asked if they can have a pint since it's late afternoon there, and I would have thought that that would be totally fine with us. I'm quite excited about this.
Aren't they meant to bring one for the teacher though?
Well, it'd be damn good if they did. I prefer it. I prefer it to an apple, but my favourite tipple is a Lefroy whiskey. For those of you who know. Okay, so let's move on from this to get rid of that screen there. By the way, Nigel, you don't sound the best, so I'm glad I'm doing this from home. So today's job is to talk about how much you need to charge. And notice that I've put need in italics. It's not about how much you'd like to charge or how much you manage to sell on a good day. It's how much you need to charge to make budget. And we've got a spreadsheet-based calculator called the minimum average sale calculator for that purpose. So it's also good to see, by the way, looking at the list of attendees, that some of you weren't too put off by the webinar we did last week. In fact, we've had some really good feedback to it. So thank you for coming back again today. That webinar now is online, by the way, including the notes from it, and we're going to be doing the same with this one. So I'm just going to go through, before we start looking at the spreadsheet itself, our goal about this. So this is what we're going to look at, and this is what this calculator is about. Given the amount that you want to earn, and that's the first question that has to be asked, and given the way that you're doing business now and the amount of business you're doing now, how much do you need to earn from each client? In other words, what you're trying to do is set a budget target, your minimum average sale, and that's what we're going to be talking about. So step one in this, sorry, my disclaimer. We need to be a bit careful about this here, I think. We know nothing about your business. We're not saying anything about your business. We're not offering you any specific financial or business advice. What we are trying to do is to offer you a few ideas and a tool that you might find useful in the form of the spreadsheet. Having said that, all spreadsheets you need to be suspicious about, and I know this from bitter experience. First of all, they could simply be wrong, but the most important reason, apart from that, is that if you put bad data in, you'll get bad information out, garbage in, garbage out. So how you use this calculator is entirely up to you. The last thing I need to say is that Joe and I have come up with some figures for this to use in the demo, but they mean nothing as far as you're concerned, and one or two areas in which that will be clear will come out. But you need to enter your own data into the spreadsheet, and you need to be careful about doing it. So, by the way, Joe will be putting information in British pounds. So, if you're here in the States or Australia or the UK or wherever that it will, Canada or whatever, you will, they will mean totally nothing to you. But anyway, moving right along. Step one, we're going to calculate the cost of being in business, and these costs exist even if you're not doing any work. So the first thing is your own salary, what you want to earn out of it, of course. Number two is the capital expenditure, things like your camera equipment, computer gear, your vehicle, and so on. They've all got to be paid for, of course. Any promotional costs, If you've got any employers, their wages have to be paid whether you're doing any work or not, perhaps, and then your overheads. And by the way, again, if anybody is having problems with our terminology, if you don't understand the words we're using to describe these things, because it does vary a little bit around the world, let us know that too. Step two, getting back to this, it's a cost of being in business. And then step two is to work out what a typical job will cost you. In other words, what you're going to be paying to get that minimum average sale. And there are two aspects to that. The first is money, everybody's aware of that, but the other is your time, and that's, as you'll see, going to be important. Step three is to use that information and calculate the amount that you need to charge. In other words, to work out that minimum average sale. And that is determined, as I say, by the amount of money that you want to earn. And then we will go through and look at ranking your costs, or at least using the data that Joe and I put into the spreadsheet. What are the biggest costs in the business? What are the smallest? And then we'll play a little bit of what if with the spreadsheet. What if I can't get my price? What if my bookings, or maybe my sales per booking, go up or down? What if I cut my costs, my albums? Maybe if I do shoot and burn. What happens if I drop my prices? What happens if I drop my prices and the bookings still go down? All these sort of questions. That's the point of having a spreadsheet, of course. And I need to start off with our own mindset, and that is, you are the most expensive cost in your business, I believe. Once you key in your own figures, I think you'll find that that is almost always true. And if it's not, maybe it should be, because maybe you're not paying yourself enough. And that means that the most important resource in your business is your time. Okay, shall I pause for questions, Nigel or Joe or Stephen, or should I just move on?
Yeah, I think the thing from my perspective is there's one thing that was missed off that list there, and that is that I believe you've got to look at the spreadsheet in a couple of different time frames. The first one is, what do I need today, and who do I want to be tomorrow? And you can't necessarily pick up a camera today, be a professional photographer, charge a really expensive amount of money for your weddings because you haven't established yourself, but you've got to have a little bit of a sense of where you're going, and you've got to make sure you can balance it with where you're at today. And sometimes you need to make different decisions today depending on where you want to be tomorrow.
I agree with that, and that's another form of what if, isn't it, really? It's totally agree with that. In fact, we mentioned that last week. You need to have a plan for getting from where you are now to where you want to get in the future. Okay, so let's start just working through the spreadsheet. And you see down at the bottom here, there are three sheets to it. Number one is the cost of being in business, as I said earlier on. Number two is the job costs. And then number three is the analysis. So Joe and I are going to step through this a stage at a time. And our first step here is working out, as I say, what you want to earn and how. And so I'm going to put in a category here, and I'm going to just say weddings. So I'm going to be a wedding photographer, and I'm going to assume for the time being that 100% of my income is going to come from weddings. So Joe, we talked about somebody wanting to shoot 30 weddings a year, and I asked Joe what you felt was the market value of each job. What do you think other people with your sort of standing will be charging? And you came up with a figure. Could you just tell me what that is?
The figure I came up with was 3,500 per job. That's on
Right.
the basis that most of the clients that I talk to are charging or getting around sort of 2,250 to 2.5 prior to shooting the wedding. That's what they're booked at.
Right.
And then they normally expect to upsell by about another 1,000 on top of that. So in terms of total revenue per wedding, I felt 3,500 was reasonable. Obviously, there will be
Okay.
people doing more and less than that.
Okay. And then how much personal taxable income would you like to earn from that? What did you
Um,
have for that?
well, again, I put 60,000. Sort of pre-tax income. I'm thinking there about someone who's possibly the sole breadwinner in their family. Perhaps they've got a wife and a couple of kids to support. Obviously, after tax, that's probably going to leave them with about 35 to 40,000. And these days in the UK, I think most people think that's you need that kind of money to live on.
Okay. All right. And this is the home of the 40-hour week, or is that New Zealand? So we'll put in 40 hours.
Yeah.
So then let's go through to our capital expenditure. So here we're talking about camera gear, computer gear, software, etc. And that's not something you spend every year. So we want to work out, this is a very crude sort of a calculation, but you had £14,500 for the camera gear. You had 8,200 quid for computer gear, etc.
Yeah.
Is that how much your car cost, Joe? I don't know.
Well, no, my car cost a bit more than that, but I took into account residual value after 3 or 4 years.
Okay, so we polled a few people to ask this. So, okay, then fill in these figures for me. How often are we going to replace our camera and gears?
Well, we assumed every 3 years, just purely on the basis that technology changes all the time.
Right. Okay, and same thing,
Same
wasn't
again
it,
for
for
computers. Yeah,
yeah, and the car 4 years.
yeah.
Now, obviously, people will be looking at this and saying, "Excuse me, how did you? Surely not that amount of money, or whatever."
Uh,
But
I, I was actually
go
hoping
on,
that
Stephen.
Nigel, when this goes online, could actually just delete that part about how often technology needs to be replaced, because Sonia seems, I tell her it's every year, but if you just
I
remove that,
can,
Nigel, that'd
yeah,
be great.
that's right. Yeah, but she's got an iPad. She's got her iPad, Stephen, so you can get away with it.
Yeah.
So I've
Okay,
come
fair
up with
enough.
$37,200 pounds, I should say, worth of gear there, which I'm replacing over a period of time. So this 10,742 needs to be covered by these jobs each year. Remember what we're doing here? We've got 30 weddings. Our only income here is 30 weddings, and that's got to be covered if we're going to stay in business. So then down here we've got promotional costs, and obviously, this could be anything. What did we say, Joe? I've forgotten.
5,000. That was for things like wedding fairs, general marketing, website, that kind of thing. Can I
Right.
just say
Okay.
before we go on to this stage, Ian, just to make it clear, I polled 8 clients. I mean, it's a relatively small number out of all those that I talked to, but just to get a rough idea on how much camera gear, computer equipment, and so on they have. I think most of them were probably quite shocked when they added it all up. But these kind of figures are based on true life situations where clients are out there doing around 30 weddings a year, and this is the kind of expense that they have.
Joe, I
I
quite
think,
agree. I was going to say that I
sorry.
quite agree with that, and if I just make a point, Stephen, I didn't mean to interrupt, that this is why you can't compete on price. You have to replace this, whereas somebody who's just doing this for a hobby and making a few extra dollars at the weekend doesn't have to consider this. They've got a camera, they just want to make some money off it. Sorry, Stephen.
Well, I was going to say the other side of that is that when you're talking about promotional expenses, you'll have the gamut of people who are active in social media and say, "Oh, I can do all my marketing on Facebook," and they can have zero in that place. And then you can have a bigger studio that might be spending $50,000 or $100,000 because they've got lots of magazine advertisements and so on. But the bottom line is you've got to make the figures real for you, and then look at the bottom line and go, "Oh, I've got to adjust this," or "Oh, that's pretty exciting." And
Exactly.
that's the point. I mean, this spreadsheet is not meant to say, "Oh, this is how a photographer should run their business." It's just say, "Look, this is how you should be thinking about your business." And don't pretend about the realities, because I've spoken to photographers when they go through this are actually earning less than the minimum wage when they turn their income into an hourly rate, and that's not good for anybody. It's not good for the industry. It's not good for them, their families, or anything. And those people should either choose to change the way they run their business, or maybe question why they're in photography in the first place if they can't earn enough money from it, because they'd have a lot more pleasure doing something else. So,
Exactly.
and
So
photographers are
our
big.
what we've done here, to be clear, is to say is to talk about somebody who's working from home and as kind of as a sole operator. So, for example, Joe, we didn't put anything in here for employee costs, did we?
No,
But
that's
clear,
right.
and the same things too if we go down here through overheads. So we've got zero overhead wages, right? And could you just read out those numbers? Save me trying to find them in the debris on
On
my
the
desk.
rent, what we did there, we put £700 on the basis that someone working from home, their accountant will give them an allowance of about £700 for the fact that they're using part of their home for their business. So this is purely based on someone who's working from home and doesn't have the overheads of an external studio.
Okay.
For
And
the same
so we
reason,
haven't allowed anything. Go on,
for
sorry.
nothing for property taxes or rates.
Right.
Um, on the power as a proportion of what you might spend in the home, I reckoned about £250.
And
Um,
we had £1,000. Remember that for phone and internet because I wondered whether Danny would think you had a good enough internet plan to upload your PhotoJunction files. But anyway,
yeah. I
okay,
mean,
insurance.
it may not be as much as that on phone and internet, but let's work with that for now. Insurance, I think we said 1,200.
No, I've got 1,000. I've just
Oh,
found it now.
1,000. Sorry,
It
1,000
was
for
the
insurance.
1,000 for that, and I think the £1,200 was for
That's right, for
professional
professional
fees,
fees.
etc.
Yeah.
And then
Um,
training.
Training, seminars, mentoring, etc. I think we left 1,000 in there, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. And then
I'm not sure
subs.
whether people picked this up or maybe I just missed it, but these figures are per year.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah, per year at the
yeah,
top of the thing there. So this
yeah.
is the your overheads for a year. Okay, motor vehicle running costs.
2,500 we had, and then 1,000 for repairs and maintenance.
Okay, and we've put a couple of other things here if there are overheads which you haven't taken into consideration. So we've got £9,000 per year of overheads, and this is for somebody working from home, and it seems like quite a lot of insurance, etc. But anyway, the point is to put your own figures in here. So now we have the magic thing. We go up here and we see we want 60,000 quid for our personal income, and that'll give us something better than the average wage. 5,000 worth of promotion, 10,700. This information here for the capital expenditure. Sorry, forgot about that. Um, Nothing for wages, basically, and then our overheads mean that our total cost of being in business per job is just over 2,800, and that compares with what you've said, Joe, is a market value for the job there of 3.5. So we've got a little
Hmm.
bit of headroom there, but not a lot, right?
Yeah.
Interesting. So now we go to look at the job costs because we haven't done any work yet. So we go to the job costs, and you can see my weddings category has been carried forward. These two here we've just left blank. So we've got some figures to put in here, but I might just cut to the chase and copy and paste some information here. Just ignore that stuff to the right there, and I'll just paste the stuff in here just to get things going. Whoops, that didn't work. Maybe you better read them out to me.
You're doing the time ones, Ian?
I'm going to do both. Let me just try something else. Maybe I've no, it's still not working. Okay, tell me what
Okay,
they are.
I'll read them out. On the money, um, you've got £297 in presentation products
And that's here, 297. And I can
and
tell you what that was
£50
because
in
I worked that figure
sundries.
out. And I also put in something for printing and £50 in sundries. Okay, so what we're saying there is that the total job costs in financial terms is about 400 quid. Now that figure there I got from, just to be clear, if I can find the spreadsheet, I got from this our calculator here, and what it's for is a contemporary leather 12 by 12 album with partially assembled page mount pages, and so those are the figures that I've used. So I'll just get that out of the way and go back to the spreadsheet here. But the other interesting thing, as I say, is time, and what I'm going to do here is to fill in those figures. If you read those out to me, Joe.
Okay, sales expenses is 8 hours.
Yep. So basically, we're
Shoot,
saying there we're allowed a day to actually make the sale ahead of time. Okay.
yeah. Shooting the image is 6.
Yep. So it's a day
Prepare,
shoot. Yep.
Preparing the image resource is 6.
Yep.
Presenting, projecting the images is 4.
Yep.
Designing the product is 4.
Yep.
Photoshop color correction 1 hour.
Yep.
Retouching 4 hours.
Yep.
Creative enhancements 4 hours.
Yep.
Placing orders 1.
Yep.
And then album assembly 3.
Okay. So effectively, I mean, chop those figures as you like, but basically we're saying there's a week's work in that wedding. And I don't know how you feel about this, and maybe we'll get some feedback from other people, but it's really, really interesting to see how those figures vary from person to person. For example, there's a really interesting thread going on the DWF at the moment where somebody's suffering from burnout from all the post-production work, and it is amazing the time that people spend on these items over here. Joe, actually, you had an interesting point.
I,
You were talking about what
I
the cost would be if we were shooting film.
Hmm.
I
Well,
think before we move on, I think what's funny is if you look at Twitter, I've got a search on Twitter for wedding albums to see what people are saying about wedding albums, and it's amazing how often you'll see somebody in the UK at about lunchtime, our time, which is what, about midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, um, which says something to the effect of just about to sit down and do 2 albums. I mean, that is totally unsustainable, and you got to start wondering whether that person's even having any fun, let alone whether their budget is actually balancing. So yeah, it's a
I agree with
challenge
that.
anyway.
That's an interesting thing. Anyway,
certainly I had.
what,
Okay,
go on.
sorry. I was going to say I had a conversation very recently with a client I'd spoken to earlier in the year who was really struggling with managing the amount of work. And I know a number of my clients outsource their initial color corrections and so on to another company. And I'd strongly recommended that she did that. She has done it, and I had a conversation with her recently, and she said she feels that she actually would have become so ill she couldn't work if she'd carried on doing the kind of hours that she was. And it really is a serious problem. I mean, if our clients are having to do many more than 40 hours a week on average over the year, then you know they are heading for burnout, definitely.
Yeah. Um, okay, so let's just continue with this down here and do the analysis. Oh, no, wait a minute, Joe. The film thing. You made an
Yeah.
interesting point. You were saying that basically it would cost you extra to shoot this job in film. In fact, for a long time you hung on with the film, I think, in your private
Hmm.
business. But the amount of time that you spend in front of a computer makes this completely different.
Yeah,
Is that
exactly.
right? Was that right?
I worked out, based on current costs of film and processing and scanning and so on, if I was just doing dev and scan, scanning to sort of, 14, 18 meg files, I'd probably be spending about £250 per wedding, assuming 15 rolls.
Wow.
And if I was having some print 6x4 prints done, it would be about 320. But I would save an enormous amount of time in front of the computer, because literally I would put the films in a bag, send them off to the lab, get them back, and I can flick through that number of prints in a very short time. Obviously, if I just got scans done, I'd probably still end up spending time in front of the computer, but that's not what I used to do. So although there's a monetary additional cost, at the same time, I'm not having to spend as much on computers and storage and
Yeah.
hardware and everything else. And it doesn't take as long to process each job.
Well, obviously, we are fans of the computer approach. The people from Photo Junction who upload, who are getting business from all the way around the world, which completely depends upon digital photography. But it is a very, very interesting point from the point of view of the studio. So let's move on to the analysis here. And again, you'll see my weddings category here, and these are my costs per year. So there's my £60,000 income. There's my capital expenditure, the allowance for this particular year, promotional costs, no employee overheads. No employees. There's my overheads as defined, somebody working from home, and there are my job costs for those 30 weddings. In other words, what we've done there is to take this figure and to multiply it by 30. So in order to achieve my income goals of £60,000, I need to make just under 100,000 quid, and I need to charge about 3230 to minimum average. My target is 3230. Now, since we're saying that the market value of each job, in other words, we reckon we should be able to hit 35, we're good to go. We're actually making our income. This is a sustainable business model as things stand. What happens, of course, is if these figures are not correct, and if I put in here, I don't know, just say 3,000, if Joe's wrong, then we're not going to hit it. We've got 3230, but we can only expect 3,000, so our income goal will be a little bit less. So if I scroll down a little bit here, my income goal was 60,000, but on these figures, I'd only make about 53. And I've got a couple of other.
What do you mean by my price premium as a percentage there?
Where's that? I'm saying,
7%.
and what that means is that I'm expecting to earn 8% more than the market average, right? Now you hold your finger in the wind there and say how much shooting a wedding is worth. we've said for the sake of the argument that it's 3.5, or I've just dropped it down to 3%. At 3.5, if I go back up here and put Joe's figure in,
Okay, so
and
just
go
to
back here,
clarify what you're saying there, what you're saying there is you've added up a whole lot of figures and you've said total revenue to achieve your job. You're getting a market premium if you charge that amount.
yeah, exactly. So
But if
here,
you
my
charge
income,
the if you charge the market rate, you're actually going to be behind $230 every job, £230 every job.
on these figures here, Stephen,
Yeah. Oh, sorry, no, you
if
just
I
changed it.
hit,
Sorry, my apologies.
yeah, if I can get the market value, I'll exceed my income goal, is what that means. I'll have done 1,200 hours per annum, in other words, basically about 30 weeks. I'd be earning 55 pounds, I should say. Better get rid of that dollar sign there, hadn't I? And so that's what it's costing. That's what it's costing me in time, and how much I'm earning per hour to do this particular job. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's move down here and see, look at some new stuff here. Just do a summary of where the time and money is going. So there's the money
Actually,
I'm spending on.
can I add to that? Because I think that some people would be sitting here going, "Gosh, you can't run a photography business in half a year." We actually did a seminar series a few years ago. What was it called? About 100K in 100 days. Um, you can, if that's the way you choose to set up your business and you make those choices and you're clear about what you want from the beginning. It's just that most people don't. There's this thing that because I can, I should, and that's why people spend too much time in front of Photoshop. But you've got to be clear about how you're wanting to run your business and make the priorities. So we're not saying this is right. It's just an example, but certainly it has been done before by a number of people. So
And the
Somebody's
other,
just gone out to have another drink, by the way. Thanks, Terry. We're sitting
um,
here.
the,
Best we can do is tea.
the other thing to consider in the UK is that you've also got VAT, which kicks in as soon as you hit, I think, around 67,000
Yeah,
turnover on a rolling 12-month period.
yeah.
The sort of figures that we're talking about would easily push you over the VAT threshold, and that immediately means that you've then got to earn more in order to pay the VAT bill and still be better off than you would be if you stayed under the VAT threshold in the first place.
Well, good point, and that refers back to what we're saying, that these figures only make sense if they're right. So you need to think about all these sort of issues. Let's go and do our analysis. So basically, in terms of time, shooting and getting the images ready to sell on the basis of my figures is 24, so over half of the time. Product design, that's making the album, Photoshop work, and and assembling the album and so on, fill out the time. So, but most of the cost is on the album, given the fact that we're doing things digital. Down here is the percentages. Yeah, that makes 88% of the presentation products. 88% of the cost is in the albums, but in terms of the time, most of it is in the shooting and preparation and so on and so forth. It's not actually in the albums. So I think that's quite interesting to go up and look at these figures here. Remember, I said that our feeling is that you are the biggest cost in your business here. £60,000 out of that £100,000 is you. And that's the first interesting thing. That makes your time the most valuable thing, because if you only want to work 40 hours a week, there's a limit to how much you can do. So I think that these figures are quite insightful in terms of showing you where your money is going. So let's go back and play little bit of this what if. If I just remind you of what those were. What if I can't get my price? What if my bookings or sales go up or down? What if I cut my album costs, etc.? So let me just start off with the first of those. What happens if, in effect, because this times are tough right now, we go up here and say the income becomes, the market rate has gone down now to £2,500. What does that do to our analysis? It means that I'm now, if I'm going to charge that, I'm asking for 30% more than what I think the market is prepared to pay, and my income has gone down to £38,000. and my costs, of course, the amount of time it's taking me to do things is exactly the same. Does that make sense to people? I mean, I know it's unhappy news, but does that make sense? Is there anything wrong with my logic there?
I think there's nothing wrong with the logic specifically, but this whole idea of what a job is worth is is really completely relative to how you're presenting yourself in the market and how you define the market. If you say my market is people that live within 20 k's of me and everybody in within 20 k's of you is out of work, then obviously it's very clear what your market price is going to be able to sustain. But if you say, for example, because of social media or otherwise, my market is the world, or my market is millionaires throughout the world, I know that's also just as extreme, but you know what I mean? You got to be very careful about how you define it. What your friends get, what people on your favorite forum are getting, is not your market. Your market is people that want to do business with people like you, and how you are able to influence them. Equally so, everybody else in the market might be getting £3,000, but your photography might be terrible, and you might not be presenting yourself well. Your market price is not the same as theirs either. So we just got to be careful about how we define that figure, but it's certainly true as a starting point as to what's it's a guide.
I wanted to actually talk about that. I put another slide down here. A couple of years ago, Heather and I went to a little town called Marfa in Texas. The interesting thing about Texas is that everybody in the States has got an opinion about it, but we really like the place. But anyway, Marfa was an interesting place in itself because it was this little island of prosperity in the middle of the West Texas desert where most of the towns looked like they were having a pretty tough time. But we went there and we had two meals, and I wanted to talk about those first two meals. The first one was in the evening. Our landlady suggested that we go to a French restaurant called Cochineal, which was run by a couple of New Yorkers who had basically headed for Texas after 9/11. Rather serious issue. But anyway, they had opened this beautiful restaurant. We had a great meal and we paid quite a lot of money for it. Anyway, next day we sort of swanned around town for a few hours and decided we would head out after lunch. And driving around this little town, it's only about 2,000 people, we couldn't find anywhere to eat except the food shack. And we drove past the food shack heaps and heaps of times. And we did not want to stop. It was this drab looking truck under a freeway flyover, and it looked terrible, and we just said, nah, there's got to be somewhere better than this. We couldn't find somewhere better than this. We went up and we bought a meal. It was fantastic. It was delicious, and we were very happy. And it turned out that we were the only people in the States that have never heard of the food shark. It's been reviewed in the New York Times and God knows what. The thing is, we were happy because it was beautiful food and it was cheap. If we had got that food there, we would not have been happy because it would have been outrageously priced. If it had been a little bit more attractive, maybe we would have stopped a lot earlier too. So I think this underlines what Stephen is saying about your market being relative. If you come across like the food shark, you have to charge food shark prices no matter how good your product is. How am I going there, Stephen? Is that, you agree with that? Is that what you're saying?
I think that's totally true, and I'm reminded of when we actually first launched into the UK. Everybody said you couldn't get more than £1,000 to £1,500 from a wedding. Full stop. That's it. No, there's no market here for you, Queensberry. And now Joe's actually putting up that the market price is £3,500, and that's not even high price nowadays. So you got to start off with what do your customers want, and how are you going to wow them, and don't get caught up in your own financial circumstances either. It's like just give people the opportunity to spend money with you, and be clear about who you're trying to be, and yeah, but also be realistic and add good perceived value. Actually, Seth Godin wrote a really awesome article a few weeks ago about pricing, about how to price, and it's well worth a read. So go look at his blog if people are looking for a bit more information about that.
Maybe if you find it, Stephen, put it into the chat. Look, I think what you're saying is absolutely correct, that you need to look at your marketing and so on and presentation in order to resolve these issues. But that is not what people do, typically speaking. What they try and do is cut costs. So I wanted to go and play a little bit of what if and say, okay, let's look at some cheaper Queensberry options. By the way, this here, remember, is for printing. That's cheap printing in the UK. We won't mention the name of the place, but it's about half the price that you'd be paying from Queensberry. So let's just put in there a cheaper album. Now that album is same size, has just as many pages in it, put the same photographs into it, but it's got a cheaper cover. It's no longer a contemporary leather cover. It's a Bengaline or a vinyl, and it's an overlay album, and you're doing the assembly. Okay, so you've got your album assembly time down here as well. So you've um, 309 cut your costs to £309.70, and if you go back and you have a look and you see, well, how much good did that do? What's it done? Well, it was about £38,000 from memory, and now so by the time you multiply it by 30, you've saved a significant amount of money doing that, and you've made things a little bit better, but you're still a long way from your income goal, right? Joe, would you mind keeping these figures actually? Let's just write them down.
All right, hold on a sec.
So Joe, we've got our original figure there with a nice Queensberry album was £38,000. Your achieved income, and when we changed that to what was it, to 206, then it went up. You got another two and a half, two. It's up to 40.8, so that's cool. And I had also looked up something out of your market, Joe, and found myself a nice, not a cheap press book. And of course, there's no printing in that because it's complete. So that's $2.99. And if you go and look at the analysis there, interesting. I beg your pardon, did I write that in wrong? It doesn't seem, no, that looks right to me. So yeah, we're getting to pretty much the same amount of money there. In fact, that looks to me like there could be one of those famous errors in there. That looks $2.99. So what originally it was 207 plus 53 points. 206, you're quite right. Okay, 309.7. Okay, I beg your pardon. Yeah, sorry. But I think the key thing here to realize is this person is looking to cut the prices of the costs, I should say, of your albums and so on. You're really just playing around the edges. It's not really making a huge amount of difference to these figures. I'm not saying there's no worth and value in having an extra £2,800 or whatever in your back pocket. Of course there is, but it's not really solving the problem. Now Gino, I see, has asked me if we could go and look at Shoot and Burn. So let's assume that Shoot and Burn gets rid of this. Right, it gets rid of this, and this figure that we've got down here for sundries covers the cost of DVDs and so on. And you might find, in fact, that you could get rid of some of these things here as well. So let's just go through and get rid of some of these figures. Maybe you don't need to. Maybe you don't need to have most of this work. You don't need to sell the images. You're just going to give them to them afterwards. You don't need to design the product. You're not going to. Well, I'm not going to. I'm going to leave that in there because it's amazing what people do for Shoot and Burn. So now there's a major advantage there. I've got my time down as well, and if I go and look at my analysis, amazingly enough, I'm still not at my income goal. I'm still not at my income goal. I'm up to 48, and that feels like it's a whole lot better, right, than 38. Not as good as 60,000, but I've made now a 10,000 difference by going to Shoot and Burn. Anybody want to butt in before I have my say?
I was actually on the Seth Godin blog trying to find the article, and
okay.
He writes too much.
You
I've
do
just
write
found
every day.
I found it. It's an article called "Accept All Substitutes." It starts off, the comments is all about pricing. The pricing is about scarcity. Scarcity, of course, demands no easy substitutes, which I think is a good summary about being clear about who you are and so forth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send it in the chat. But if anybody's watching the webinar later, they'll just have to search on this website for accept all substitutes. Anyway,
okay.
Now.
So my statement to Gino is that going to Shoot and Burn has still not solved my income goal. I can solve my problem by just saying, hey, I'm happy with £48,000, and now I'm only working a half-day week, right? So I have got other income. Possibilities. I've got free time. So that's the first thing to say about that. The second thing to say about it is this: I started off aiming to be cochineal, and by going to Shoot and Burn, I truly believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in 30 years I've only seen a few photographers, in fact I can only think of one off the top of my head, who have not used albums, presentation, whatever, their physical evidence of what's going on, in their business, where they stand in the market. I think that by doing shoot and burn, long run, you're changing from the cochineal to the food shark, and then you start having to charge food shark prices. In other words, when you go back to this, what you really need to do to make this a practical um, calculation is to say, what is a shoot and burn job worth now? And to pick up on one of Stephen's themes, what's it going to be worth in 3 to 5 years as the market finds its own level, where the market leaders stand out and everybody else is competing on price, and that figure goes down over time.
Well, at the
I think,
at the
however,
moment,
I,
sorry.
sorry, Joe, you go first.
Go on, Joe. You were going to give us
I
some
was going to
information.
say, at the moment, I'd say if you were doing shoot and burn, you'd be doing well to get £1,500.
Okay, let's
Most
put it
people,
in.
most photographers will probably be charging less. So there are
These
some who
figures,
charge more, but
these figures are going to look good for Queensberry, so I'm going to put them in. Okay. So now our income on those figures has gone down to £18,000. Now I'm sure you'd need to go and tweak more stuff, and you're only working half a week. But in fact, maybe you're working less. Maybe you don't even need to spend a day selling. Maybe you're just going to go out there on a Saturdays. Maybe you're in fact now a backyarder. I don't know. But the point is that you're saying that we've now dropped from £3,500 down to £1,500, and that is the key issue.
I think, however, the idea for some people of shoot and burn, it's a bit like a crack habit, to be honest. It's just easy money. It's where you see that there's this divide where people are actually doing shoot and burn as a uh, like a job after their real job, and the attraction is they get £1,500 and it's only for a Saturday's work, and that's making a significant impact on people's business. Now, the problem is, if somebody wants to be a professional photographer who has to have these business costs and so forth, they've got to be really clear about where they're at, because most people aren't going to be happy with an $18,000 income, so they've got to slash their prices and so forth. But then, to me, that brings up the second question, which is, who the hell do you want to be? If you just go there and you work for the day and you give somebody a CD at the end of the day, that's cool. It's nice. You probably are doing a really creative job, but A, you're not earning enough income, but there's nothing marketing your business apart from the fact that somebody said, I got Joe Blogg's photographer to do my wedding for £1,000. It just doesn't make sense. So the point is, start off with who you want to be. I mean, are you an artist? Are you in this for money and so forth? And then work back from that and decide, okay, so I need stuff out there that's marketing myself. Oh, I need a social media presence. I need stuff out there that's marketing myself, the albums and so forth. And as soon as you get into that mode of what professional photographer means, rather than just somebody who's doing photographs for a little bit of income, the business realities change for you. And I think this is where, as a company, our account managers are focused on. They don't necessarily know what's right for you, but there are certain business fundamentals that we need to focus on. That's what this spreadsheet is trying to show. But equally, show our business model is meant to be about how you can have the best of both worlds. We do the work, you guys do the photography. Collectively, we make a good income out of it. But go read books like Gary Vaynerchuk's Crush It and so forth. A business is not easy. What makes a business possible is being passionate about what you're trying to do and achieve, and who you're trying to be, and being surrounded by people you love and so forth. It's not just about the income at the end of the day. So
He had to say that it's a family business. He has to pretend he cares for his father. I'm going to suggest another what if here. Let's say we stick with our 3.5, and we can only get 20 bookings, right? And now, so let's go back and put our change our job costs back to what they were. What was it again, Joe? In fact, let me.
297 in the album, assuming we're going back to the page mount 15 page.
I wonder why I couldn't copy and paste these. I'm going to have another crack at it. Copy, because this is driving me nuts. Paste special. Has anybody mentioned I hate Excel? Ah, thank goodness. There we go. Okay.
There's actually some really good questions. There's some really good questions coming up, and I wonder before we move on whether Nigel wants to ask them, and we can quickly, because we're getting close to an hour. So, Nigel.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. Yeah, we've got one specifically for Joe, actually. They've just said, question for Joe. As a relative newcomer to wedding photography, obviously I want to be at 60K point, like the example.
Yeah.
How many years experience do you reckon you'd have to reach a 3.5K wedding? And any tips on how they target their marketing to achieve that sort of price for a wedding? I'm
Well,
hoping to be there within
there's,
the next two or
there's a
three
whole
years.
whole hour's chat in one go there. I think that I mean, when I first started as a photographer 10 years ago, I would have been disappointed not to have got up to around 30, 35 weddings a year in 2 years, 2 to 3 years. These days, I think you're looking at more like 3 to 5. Certainly, if you're looking to turn over around sort of £3,500 per wedding, it is a slower growth situation that we're in now. You have to market yourself. You have to know who it is that you are, what it is that you're offering, who your target market is. You need to have the right sort of website, connections with venues, connections with other suppliers in the wedding industry, and all of that takes a lot of time to develop and to network. But I think the most valuable thing that people can do when they're starting is to really think about what type of photographer they want to be and what type of clients they want to work with, and then see who else is doing that, and not necessarily in their local area, but just generally, see who's out there, see what they're doing, find out what the PR is around those people, um, and then think about how they can work towards achieving that kind of reputation, that kind of success. Because once you're there, providing you keep the momentum going in your business, then it does grow. But it takes a while to get there, and you have to be persistent, and you have to be, you've just got to work really hard, and not just take the easy jobs because they're offered. If it's not your target market, then don't do the job.
I, I,
I think
I
that's
I
good.
think I think it's a great question, but I struggle with the idea about there being a right amount of time.
Yeah.
I think that there's a certain amount of time to become an expert in something. Experience and so forth is the case. Marketing, sales, and so on is about um, is a learnable talent. But connecting with people doesn't take time. So I'd prefer to use an analogy. It's a bit like analogy of pushing a snowball down a hill. If you push it slowly, it's going to grow slowly. If you push it quickly, it's going to grow quickly. So how long is really just about how true you are to yourself, how clear you are, how you get noticed, and people make their own luck. I mean, there might be a job that you do which makes you celebrated. You might go and put yourself on a Facebook forum, and suddenly photographers go, "Wow, that young guy's doing really, or woman is doing really amazing things." And suddenly you've got a big following, and you can use your big following to give you credibility as a good photographer and so forth. I'm not. We absolutely believe in quality and all those sorts of things. So I'm not trying to undermine the need for a photographer to be talented, but they're not the same thing as being effective in a business sense. They're related, and the time really comes down to how hard you want to push this, and the chances you're prepared to do it. If you want to do it the way everybody else does it, it's going to take you a long time. If you want to go
Mm.
out there and get noticed, it doesn't take necessarily a huge amount of time. So
Can we go back and look at I think that's all true. Go back and look at these figures I've just typed in here. I've said let's leave it at 3.5, and just say, well, we're only going to hit 20 weddings, and just go and have a look and see what happens as a consequence. We're using the same figures as we did before, and now if we were to hit our this is the way the spreadsheet works. If we want to hit our target income, we'd have to charge £4,600 from those 20 weddings in order to make our income goal. However, we set that. And if we didn't, if we could only achieve the market value of that job for what we're doing, we would only make £37,000, which is kind of equivalent to what we did by dropping the price. The interesting thing is, I guess, that we're still doing a week to deal with that wedding. We're using a week up to do that wedding, but in fact, it's less than half a week's work. So we've got lots of other income opportunities. Does that make sense? Because what I wanted to do was to show you another way of looking at this problem, because we've assumed here that all we're going to do is to shoot 30 weddings, but that's all we can do because we're taking up the entire week to shoot the wedding. So what could you do about that particular problem? So if we go back and say, um, what else could I do? So let me type in portraits. Now, somebody in one of the questions suggested that we do. Actually, I don't think I can find it. I can't remember who it was either, but it was a good question. Yeah, it was Ivan. 24 portrait sessions with an £800 average. So let's do that. Average and 24. So he's doing one every 2 weeks. And I don't know how much. What should I say there, Joe? What percentage of our income would come from portraits? Was 20.
Let's say 30%.
30%. Okay, so that means that's now 70, right? Now there's an interesting thing that happens here. When you only got to achieve 70% of all these costs down here from your weddings, the price that you need to charge drops down. Obviously we need to put more figures in here and we don't have time to do it. So for example, we're not going to have any more overheads, our capital expenditure. Surely to goodness, we're not going to be buying more cameras and more computers and that kind of stuff, another car to deal with this. So that figure's not going to change. You might want to spend some money on, I don't know, I'm just picking a figure here, on promotional expenses. We don't have an employee. We're only working for half a week. Our overheads remain the same. So now we're looking at a situation where on these figures, if we want to hit 30%, I'd need to charge a little bit less. So let's play with that figure and say we're going to make 75 and 25 and see what those figures come out, because Ivan only wants to charge 800 quid. Yeah, so we're getting pretty close. Let's not try and get right to the point here. And we've got another problem, which is that we're spending all of our time on weddings, and so we don't have time to do our portraits. So let's look at another option. Let's let Queensberry do some of the work, and I'll explain what these figures mean after I try and copy and paste them. Right. Okay. Now what's happened? We've asked Queensberry to design the product, and that's again taken off our UK price list. We've asked Queensberry to color correct the images. We've got Queensberry to assemble the album, and we've got Queensberry to do the printing. So there's a big difference happened here to our job costs. It's gone up from, what was it originally, about £400 to about 630. But look what's happened to the time that's involved, right? The time that's involved has dropped in half, and I would like to suggest that it could drop in half even more. One of our friends, Rebecca Portsmouth in the States, had an interesting comment on DWF the other day saying, you know, the good thing about using Lightroom, you don't open the files, you don't get to look at them in Photoshop and say, oh, I could just have a little fiddle here. And so consequently using Lightroom saves an enormous amount of work. Well, trust me, if you get Queensberry to design the album and all that kind of stuff for you, you're going to save an awful lot of fiddling as well as the actual budgeted time involved in it. So now we've got the possibility, if we go to our analysis, of
She still, however, really cares about the quality of her images, as do we. It's not about caring less or doing less. It's about just choosing how you get the job done. Last week I was talking about the value of leveraging your time, and this is one of those opportunities to leverage your time.
Exactly. And Stephen, I'm not suggesting that it is about caring less. In terms of what we were discussing last week, it's about who pays. I think that if you're going to spend a lot of time in Photoshop doing color correction stuff or enhancing the look of the bride and so on, these things need to be presented as extras for which they pay. That if you were doing a shoot and burn, for example, you wouldn't be doing that. There are two problems with shoot and burn: doing a whole lot of work for nothing and making that define your business. So now I'm certainly not happy with this yet, but I've only shooting 20 weddings. I've got some free time, and despite the fact I'm paying more for my albums, I've got an increase in my income because I'm using my free time to do something more, the time that I've freed up, perhaps that's a better way of putting it, to do something which I can earn more money from, which is shooting portraits. So I'm not happy with these figures as they are now. I'd still like to tweak them, but I'm trying to present the possibility to you, as I said earlier on, that there are more ways of, I have to think of a better expression here, of skinning a cat than just to cut your album costs, or to move to shoot and burn, or to drop your prices. And it's just 9 o'clock. Have we got any other questions, Nigel, or should we leave it at this? Looks like it's probably time to wrap up.
Yeah, we've got quite a few questions, but Danny and I are answering most of them as they come. It is 9 o'clock, so it is probably time to wrap up. We will be here for the next sort of 10-15 answering any other questions that come in, though. And a question we've had a lot is, will this calculator that Ian's been demonstrating with be available after the webinar? And yes, it will. That's right, isn't it, Ian? We'll be able to. It'll be available for everyone that's come along.
Yes, but can I ask a favour of the people in the audience first, and that is, if you've got any feedback on it. I realise that this is quite complicated to use. I don't want to put it out as an Excel calculator anymore, because basically software like Google Docs takes away the ability to protect it, to look after it, and it really needs to be locked down. So all you can do, in effect, if I can just show you, is to enter data in the blue boxes, and if you can do that, then it works. Errors and omissions accepted. So number one, it's going to be available online. You'll be able to go to our website, log in with your normal login details, go to your account, and use the webinar online. Now it's going to take a while to do that, because I'd like to have any feedback that you might have about the spreadsheet before I do that. So any feedback would be really appreciated, but the answer is yes, it will be available online. You will be able to enter in your own data and play with it to your heart's content.
Cool. And we'll post on our blog when that is ready, and links to where you can access that, as we will with the recording once that's online as well.
And we've had more questions here than any other.
Sorry, what was that, Stephen?
I think you're
guys keep
disappearing.
Sorry.
I was going to say, I don't know whether people can hear me, but I was going to say that we've had more questions asked about this than any other webinar that we've ever given, and so there's lots of fuel here for the blog. We'll go through that. If there's anything else we can do to answer particular questions, or if you've got particular questions, then please get in touch with Gino, Dean, Joe, and the rest of the reps, who will be able to answer them one at a time. Or if you want to get onto the blog, Queensberry Connects, and comment or ask questions there, that would be great. And we have fodder for more blog posts to follow up as well. We'll be putting the webinar up as soon as possible. It'll probably take a day or two longer to get the actual spreadsheet up, as I say, because I'll wait for feedback, and then we'll have to get the thing online once we've got that. But I hope you've enjoyed the presentation and got something from it. I'm not saying, and I want to make this clear, that we've got the answers to any problems or challenges that anybody might have, but I do think that this approach asks some really good questions. Nigel, I'll pass it back to you to wrap up.
Awesome, thanks, Ian.
Thanks. Sorry, I just wanted to say one thing, and that is that we set up the forums on the Queensberry website, www.queensberry.com/forums, because really we want to start building a community for photographers to be able to start talking about things through themselves. And we've got the various Facebook pages and so on. The advantage of the forums, though, is it's actually private. People have to log in, and all this stuff isn't available, to the general public, if you like. But we're I think more than anything, more than beautiful albums and so forth, we're passionate about two things. One is people's stories, the bride and groom, the people in the viewfinder, and the second thing is helping people run profitable, exciting businesses which they enjoy and they can feel passionate about. So, this is the beginning of a long conversation which we want everybody to join in and share and help each other do the same. So that would be how I'd like to end it. So I thank you, everybody. So, Nigel?
Cool, thanks a lot, Stephen. Yeah, thank you for coming along, everyone, and thank you also to Ian and Stephen and Joe and Danny behind the scenes, who's been helping answer questions. You guys did another great job. Keep an eye on the blog, and if you do have any feedback, we'd love to hear it, as Ian said. Either chat it in just before you go. We'll be around for another 15 minutes or so. Otherwise, you can email it to nigel@queensberry.com, and as I say, we take all of that on board and try and improve these every time we do them. So thanks a lot for taking the time, and we'll hope to see you back at another webinar soon. Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.